Good morning, everyone. If you can hear me, type in good morning. Edric and Manav, I know you were here early. Good morning. Dale, good morning. Kelly, Liam, Edric, Bardia, Ignore, Spencer, what is up, my friends? Christopher, Anako, good morning. Avneet, how are you, my friend? Perfect. Gersharanjit, good morning. Satsrika, my friends. Bonjour tout le monde. We're having another amazing class. Samuel, it's true. Samuel, you're in my class. Terrific. Good morning, my friend. Kamal, good morning. What are we doing today? So here's what's on the menu for today. First of all, we're going to have a look at our main document just to figure out where we are. So we go to our week-by-week breakdown and figure out sort of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Where we're going is a test. So what's next week's test going to look like? I told you I want you to succeed, so I never send you into anything unprepared, and that's already begun because the homework is preparing you for the test. The test will look exactly like the homework, essentially. There's no surprises. I just want it to be more of the same. If you do the practice, it'll feel like it's just a smooth transition. It's just that this time it counts, right? And so once we've had a look at our main document and we've had a look at what the next week's test is going to look like, then I'll open up the space for if there are any questions. And I mean that for you've had a week to look at the main document that was part of your homework. You've also started your homework. And also, I will have gone over what next week's exam is going to look like. So we'll open up the floor for all that. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. We'll open the floor at that time. So hold your questions until that time. I did slot some space for that. After that, we're going to spend the bulk of our time today working on symbolization. Remember, symbolization is the technical term for this movement from normal language to this kind of more algebraic, algebra looking like language using symbols. So instead of writing out propositions in full English, what we're going to do, and we could be doing this in any language, but the nice thing is when we move to symbolization, well, we leave the English language behind, and that gives us, there's advantages to that. And so it's much easier to manipulate, but that's a skill and it requires practice. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we'll go gradually, we'll practice together. And as always, I like ramping things up. So we start with little examples and specimens and we work our way to larger and larger specimens. And then what we'll do with the whole class is we'll work on actual homework. Now, there's two homeworks that you do on symbolization, the first and the second one. The first you've already done. So that always makes for a good class. You'll notice in the main document, I say, come to class prepared with any questions you may have. That's questions if, like, I can't handle panic attacks from people who haven't worked. So if you haven't worked and you come into class and you do a panic attack, I can't help you with that. But if you've put in the work and you've done everything I told you to do, and then there's fine tuning, like it's a specific question. You say, Professor, can we look at homework number, blah, 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 question number, blah, blah, blah. And then we zero in on that. And I say, okay, what's your concern? And then and then I clarify things. That's productive. So we'll do that for the first symbolization homework. So if you've got questions that arose in the course of doing that homework, we'll put some space for work on that. And then once that's done, then we'll start the second symbolization homework together so that we practice and also just a confidence booster so you can see you can do this. And as always, these things kind of ramp up. The difference between the first symbolization homework and the second is in the first homework, you're working on symbolizing just standalone propositions. They're compound propositions, but they're just propositions. Whereas in the second homework, you'll be looking at arguments. So there's these propositions that also all of a sudden start getting strung together such that some support others. So they're what we call premises supporting conclusions. And I'll teach you how to symbolize all of that. All right, so that's what we're going to learn today. That's what we have on the menu. That's how we're going to spend our time. As a reminder, I don't like going anywhere beyond 12:15, but we'll, I think, make full use of our time. So I hope you brought your food. I hope you brought your coffee. Does that sound like a plan, everyone? If you're good to go, type in GTG. Are you good to go? I'm good to go. I'm stretching. Get that blood flow going. Folks are good to go. Michael's good to go. Isabel, perfect. Spencer, looking great. Good to go. I'm good to go. Bavishi's good to go. Kartik, perfect. All right, my friends, let's do this. So what are we doing? Where are we? Let's have a look at our main document. And remember, this is super important. You've agreed to this lease now. It's a technical document. The part that interests us the most, I think, are probably the grading scheme and the week-by-week breakdown. Let's have a look at the grading scheme. Let me zoom in here. Remember, you have 5 drills that you're completing this month. worth 2% each. Just a reminder, those drills have to be done to perfection, so they have to be 2%. If you have, let's say, 1.8% for your drill, I'll give you 0 for it. It doesn't count. You need 2% in order for that to register on my spreadsheet. And so if you've got a partial grade, you got to do it all over again. No problem, though. You have unlimited tries, right? But the drills, you have to trust me. This is where the Karate Kid analogy with wax on, wax off. Remember the Karate Kid movie? The kid shows up. He asks the sensei, can you teach me karate, which is a combat sport? And the sensei, the master, says, well, start waxing my cars. And he's like, well, I don't understand. It's like, don't ask questions, just wax my cars, but in this very specific manner. Like he's supposed to use one arm to wax on and wax off and do these circular movements. And eventually we find out, and I've shown you the sort of second month little video on my Moodle page, we find out that that pays off in a big way. Well, it's the same thing. You have to trust me. Next month, well, basically in 2 weeks, the drills that you're working on right now, no matter how mind-numbing they may seem, are really, really going to pay off. And they're going to enable you to succeed at the next skill that we're going to learn. So remember, these have to be perfect. I've looked at the grading sheet. Most folks have done them all. If you haven't, get to it. Crack that whip. What's wrong with you? Do it. Those few of you, there's really not that many who haven't done them, or those of you who haven't done them to perfection, redo the ones. If it starts with a 1 or a 0, you're not going to get anything. You're going to get a 0. It has to start with a 2. You have to have perfection. All right. So those are the drills. Are there any questions about the drills? So folks who've done them, are any questions? Is everything clear? If everything's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question about the drills, ask away. I just want to check in with you on those. And I'm still working on like the fine-tuning of the settings, because I'd want to be clear that if you don't get 2%, you can't get the next access to the next one, right? So that's, Moodle's helping me out in that regard. All right, so everyone's good on that. Now we're going to have our test next week. So here's test 1 on symbolization. And so that's going to be worth 20%, and we'll look at today how that's going to work out. Just remember, as far as the time, it starts at 10. And it's going to end at 1. So we'll use the entire duration, but you want to be smart. You have to upload your answers, and you want to do that before 1, because I don't accept anything late, right? So let's have a look at our week-by-week breakdown now to see where that test is actually located in our schedule. All right, here we are, the last 2 pages. Last week, and I can't believe we've only met once. It's like we accomplished so much in this class. It feels like we've been together for a month. Am I the only one who feels that way? Like it feels like you've been doing this class for a month already. Do you feel like that as well? Because I had you work so much, right? Like pow! It's like boom. Yeah, I feel like that as well. Yeah, it's like, man, it was a lot of work, and it feels when our perception of time is very weird, right? It was a productive last week. Agreed. I have to get started right away with this class. I can't dilly-dally around. It's just such a packed class. Logic is just the way it is. Right, so I'm glad folks have, and if you get that feeling, it's because you've done the homework, by the way. So if you feel like me, that it's been like almost a month that we've been together and working on this, it's because you did all your homework. That means you crammed a lot into that 1 week. And so I'm glad. And Manav, I'm loving your energy as well. Turnout's good. Energy is good. Remember, I can't do this alone. If you guys are like all like asleep at the wheel and you hardly show up and you don't do your stuff, like, holy cow, I can't bring it because I'm human, right? I feed off your energy as well. So today, here we are, January 16th. We're working on symbolization. And what you got to do this week is the more drills, right? Steps 5 and 6. And then the step 7 we'll do next week. I kind of spread them out. And we keep practicing them throughout the term. And then you notice here next week, we will have the test. The final step, by the way, you can do it whenever. It doesn't necessarily have to be the morning of. So if you don't want to burn yourself out before the test, you don't feel like you need to do it before, but you need to do it. The tests all the drills are going to close before I start the class on January 30th. Your access to the drills will be completely shut down. So if you, for whatever reason, fall behind a little bit, maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but get your stuff done, because eventually they'll all just disappear from view, and then it's too bad, so sad if you don't get your grades. But everyone should get those grades quite easily. And here I say, rid your morning of distractions and put yourself in the right mindset. Preparation for the test begins the day before. Go to bed early. Don't get into an argument with your partner or parents or whatever. It really will affect your performance. So do what you got to do to shine during those 3 hours. And then after that, we're going to be starting the second skill. Because remember, this course is built around 3 months, 3 skills of increasing of increasing, let's say, difficulty and increasing duration a little bit. So 3 weeks for the first month, so to speak, month, right? And then 4 and then 5. And then so to prepare for that, it's like a step, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3. You need to really have done the first one in order to move to the next. So that's our that's where we are as far as the week by week breakdown. Let's have a look at the actual test. I promised you that I would show you what it will look like. I know that's what's on your mind. Here's what it will look like literally. This is what you're going to get. You're going to get 2 files. One of them is going to be a PDF with questions. So let me say that again. One of the files that you'll have access to at 10 a.m. next week will be a PDF file. That PDF file, you can see here, it has 3 pages in all. So part A and part B, all in all, something like 3 pages. And on it, you'll have the questions. And the questions look exactly like your homework. So look here. This looks exactly like minus the actual wording, your homework. You'll have a piece of language. So here I write blah, 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 because I'm actually not going to give you the questions before the actual test. But what you'll have is a piece of language, so a set of compound propositions, right? And your job in part A will be to add connectives to the letters provided so as to capture the logical structure of the following propositions. Your answers must not be written here, but instead on the test's Word answer file on Moodle. So the other file you'll have, which won't be a PDF, will be a Word file. And it's on that file that you'll type in, and I mean type, you'll have to use your typewriter, your computer to type in your answers, right? And notice here the letters provided, just like your homework. You've noticed that in the homework, I give you the little capital letters already so that we all can agree on what the answers are going to look like. Same thing, I'll provide the letters, and I believe in the homework I underline whichever letter I was referencing. So let's say, for instance, I say, Peter went to the theater, and I underline, let's say, T for theater. Then if I use T to stand for that proposition, I think I underline the letters. I'll do the same thing, right? So it'll be very, very easy. That's part A. There'll be 4 questions worth 1% each. These are going to just be propositions, kind of like first symbolization homework. So part A, by doing the first symbolization homework, you're preparing for that. Here you'll have the English proposition, and on your answer sheet, you'll have to write it in symbols. And what your answer sheet is going to look like, let's have a look at that right away. That will be a Word file that'll look like this. This will be your answer sheet. And notice there are 2 colors on this answer sheet, black and red. All you got to do is you take this Word file, you don't touch a single thing, and you replace the parts in red with your answers. So if you look here at the top, it says, replace this with your full name. Well, this is going to be a workable file because it's going to be a Word file. You just type in your full name and replace this with your student ID. Please don't forget to do that. That should be the first thing you do, because it will suck if you upload it and you don't have your name. I really want to be able to track who did what. And here will be the instructions. The file you are reading is the one you will use for your answers. Write your full name and KPU student identification number at the red spots above. To avoid loss of data, be sure to save your file often as you work. Fit everything on one page. So you see here, this is one side of one page, not 2 pages. At the end, everything should just be 1 page. So fit everything on one side of 1 page. Once you're done, proof everything. Give yourself enough time to go over what you did and check yourself. Then save your final answers as a PDF. You know how to do that. Right-click, save as. Or if you don't know how to do that, there's even free websites where you can convert a Word file into PDF. You have less than 3 hours. And notice I say less than 3 hours because I don't accept anything late. So you got to be smart and turn it in early. Less than 3 hours to upload your finished PDF file. So time yourself carefully and plan enough time to upload your answer at the proper spot on Moodle. So on Moodle at 10 a.m., you will see 3 things. You'll see the PDF file with the questions, the Word file with the answer, this answer file that you type in, and the spot where to upload them. Right? It's really, really straightforward. And the only clock that matters is Moodle's countdown, not sort of the international clock I was having a look at. You can submit only once. Late uploads get 0%, emailed attachments get 0, great excuses get 0. Good luck. And here are the symbols to use. And then what you do is you scroll down here. And remember a moment ago I said that part A had 4 questions, question 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, you see here in red, replace this with your answer. That's it. It's really straightforward. And then you do that also for part B. It also have different questions, right? So replace this with your answer. And here's where you write out your string of symbols. And notice here, I've given you a reminder of the symbols to use. And so if you haven't, and you should, and you have to actually install your shortcut keys. But if in case you know, for whatever reason, you can copy paste these exact symbols, right, to compose your answer over here. So what you do is you use capital letters, right, A, B, C, and capital, whatever is the recommended letters for all those propositions, and you string them together such that you end up with something like, who the hell knows, right? Something like this, right? P and A, right? And then use your parentheses, right? Like, it is not the case that, let's say, right? And if it's not the case that, then, right, Q, or whatever, right? And that will be your answer. And you'll type that in the red area. And that's it. And you either get it right or you get it wrong. If you get it right, it's 1%. And for these will be arguments. So let me have a look now at part B. These will be arguments. So same thing. You're going to have a question file that will be the PDF. Part B is going to say add connectives to the letters provided so as to capture the logical structure of the arguments. Be sure to divide premises with the single slash, and conclusions with the double slash. I'll teach you this today, right? We separate premises with one slash, conclusion with double slash. Your answers must not be written here, but instead on the Word file. And then you have a question here. It's 1% for a perfect conclusion, 3% for perfect premises. All right, so it's going to be worth 4%, and that's how I'll grade them. And it's an all or nothing thing, right? So it's like, yeah, it's either 1 out of 1 for the conclusion, or it's 3 out of 3 for the perfect premises, and that adds up to 4 out of 4 or whatever, right? But there is no like in between. Likewise for these, right? It's going to be 1 point or 0. You either get it right or you get it wrong. And as you saw with the solution sheets, that's just the way it is. All right. So part A, part B, 4 questions times 4 makes 16%. Part A was worth 4%. The whole thing adds up to 20%. I keep the math nice and simple. All right. And then you have here again, I just say blah, 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 right? But you'll notice I've give you our scheme of abbreviation, like what letters stand for what. That will already be given to you underneath. That's something that's going to look like your second homework. So if this looks slightly unfamiliar, don't panic. Your second homework is going to look exactly like that. I'll provide the scheme of abbreviation beneath, and you'll be working on that all week. So by the time you do it, it'll just be more of the same, just more homework next week. That's it. Only this time it will count. All right. And you'll have all the questions here. Question 8 is the last one, and then you're done. And you got to be smart about this. You don't want to turn it in late. So what should be a good time for you to turn in your PDF at the proper upload spot? What would be a smart time for you to upload? Interviewer says 12:30. Alexander says 12:45. I'm going to say 12:30. Right? So in your head, right, tell yourself, or run to the nearest McDonald's. That's right. You don't want to run to the nearest McDonald's. That's not a good solution, but yeah. So 12:30, right? And I've timed this so that this is all feasible. If you've done the homework, this is totally doable. It's not a test that you can totally do this. It's not impossible. It doesn't guarantee perfection, but you'll do this. And that is it. My friends, I've told you where we are. I've told you what the test is going to look like. And we also had a whole week to look at our main document, and we did a bunch of stuff last week. Let's open up the floor. Are there any questions, or is everything clear? If you have a question, please, this is a great time to do it. Ask your question now. Now's the time. And if everything is clear, ask your question. Do I want the answers in red? Red is fine, Dale. Actually, make it easier for me to spot them after when I grade them. Red is just fine. Just change the writing. Keep it red. Good question, Dale. Does that answer it? It makes my grading easier, right? Because it's mind-numbing. Yeah, Anako, you can ask a question about the homework when we get to this part over here, Anako. Definitely. Yeah. When we get there. I'm counting on it. Terrific. Other questions about what we did last week, the course outline, or whatever. Anson asks, are all future tests and quizzes going to be formatted like this? No, because they're going to be a little different. In the future ones, the questions will be in the Word file, Anson. So instead of giving you a PDF and a Word file, the questions will be in the Word file themselves, and then you'll type in that very file, and then you'll save it as a PDF, because the subject matter is going to change a little bit, and it won't be relevant given the different skill. So, but other than that, you'll still save the PDF, upload it at a proper spot. The file will be available at 10 a.m. That all is going to stay the same. Does that answer your question? Very good question as well. And also about what we did last week. Remember, we looked at 5 connectives. We did truth tables. We talked about like all sorts of stuff. I've got some questions now, but I'm going to give it a last call. Is everything clear, or do you have a last call for questions? So clear or questions? Type in clear if everything's clear. I want to hear from you. Otherwise, last call for questions. And I'm happy to answer your questions just so that we know what we're doing and we're moving forward and we understand the subject matter, right? What if a question has multiple answers? It doesn't. So it will never happen under my watch. So the way I selected these is there's no dilly-dallying around. You've seen, for instance, Michael, in the homework, there's only one correct way to symbolize these things, demonstrably so, right? And sometimes it happens, though, with logic, Michael, that it can be a little ambiguous or fuzzy, but I preach you all the language to make sure that there's only one answer. This is not a course in informal logic. It's a course in formal logic, or it's not a course in what we call argumentation theory. Language is messy, but the language I give you is a kind of an artificial sounding kind of logic, just so that it's very easy to carve it at its joints and to see what's what. Michael, does that answer your question? Like there in real life, yeah, real life is, and that's why, for instance, it took so long, and I think AI is getting around to it now, but it took so long for AI to model ordinary languages because it's so complex. But luckily for me, I get to choose which fragments of language I expose you to. And so what I do is I just preach you the language, and I make really simplified examples, enough so that, there's only one possible answer. That's it. And it's also not too challenging for folks who don't necessarily master English to a high degree. I wouldn't want to make this course as hard as an English class, right? Although there's still some stuff. In the homework, we'll do that in a moment, Edric. Same answer as Anako. So when we get to that, yeah. So unless there's always a little trickier one, right? And we can catch that out. I think we can wrap our minds around that one. You'll see. Yep, we'll get to that. Let's practice together now. Let's do some practice. I'm going to open up a file, and we're going to do this. And I go back and forth between PDFs and let me open this up. And Word files, because Word files are nice. They can move around. PDFs are wonderful because they're frozen, but precisely for that reason, that's a little problematic for sometimes. Let me just set that up, see if everyone can see that. All right, here we go. Share screen. Can everyone see an argument, a bunch of stuff on a blue, like whatever, like tell me what word you see. Like I've selected a word, tell me what word you see here. Just type that in. Super. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks, everyone. Not only do I want to make sure you see it, I want you to be able to see that which parts I select. So you remember this argument, right? So I'd given it a long argument in the first class last week that involved chess, and you might think, well, that's dependent on my knowledge of chess, whether to figure out what's the move at the end, right? No, actually, it depends on logic because you can recast that exact same argument. So whatever P stood for, and originally I thought it was like if I take his pawn or some nonsense like that, and here I had fun, I gave you an alternate version. If I sign the petition, and K was if I take the king, and now it's, well, if the events keep happening, right? So it's like you can just focus on the formal structure of an argument and drop this matter, so to speak, right? And that's the formal when we say we're studying Introduction to Formal Logic. And remember why we do what we do. We do what we do in this class for two reasons. One, it's not at all obvious, given these reasons that were laid out, what ought to logically follow after. Like what comes after the therefore? Like that's the first problem. Our minds can't handle this. They can handle smaller arguments, right? And I suppose if you're some sort of savant, maybe slightly larger than usual, but there's a point at which you hit a limit. I don't care how bright you are, you reach a stage where you can't do it, or at any rate, your reliability in your judgment and your ability to draw the inferences, to draw the correct conclusion, starts to drop dramatically. So that's one of the reasons why we learn these skills, is because we can't figure it out. And moreover, if we do figure it out, we're in no position to say whether or not we got it right or wrong. Like, let's say someone says something. So imagine, for instance, that someone says this conclusion. So given everything that's above here, and we'll call all of these reasons the premises, we'll call this entire thing an argument, right? And we'll call the thing that we conclude from those premises the conclusion. Well, suppose someone says that the conclusion is this here, right? Let me put it in what's a good color? Blue, right? Either Q or E, which means in this case, either quotas will be implemented or elections will be triggered. And, you know, talk is cheap, but they're not just saying that. They're saying that on the basis of everything that came before, all of the reasons offered in support. So all of the reasons offered in support, they're in orange over here. These are the premises, right? So the premises, let me write this word. That's the technical term for all of the reasons given to support a conclusion. And then what you have is the conclusion over here, and that's the technical term, one that luckily is familiar to you, right? And the conclusion here, let's say someone blurts out, either quotas will be implemented or elections will be triggered. So someone says either Q or E. Well, did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? We need a method to figure it out. So not only is it hard to come up with a conclusion, but if you do, how in the world are you possibly going to prove that? And that's what we're learning in this class. And in order to do that, there's a couple of things we need to do along the way. One of them is trim all of this and replace it with, you know, you trim all the particular language and you focus only on the structure. So you end up with something like this, right? If P, then either Q or B. And then you can also change this, right? For instance, and say, instead of saying if P, then either Q or B, right? Then you can say something like this, right? You can have fun, and we know these, we've got these shortcut keys, right? You can replace it with this, and you keep changing that, and the goal is to then manipulate it. Now, I'm giving you a sort of a heads up on what we're going to do next week. One of the things when we get an individual claim, right, is that we can at least figure out that it could be true or it could be false. So that's what we were working on with those truth tables last time in your drills, right? So there's two skills here that get combined. One of them is moving from English to something like this, and the other is cataloging the possible truth values of these propositions. What we're doing this month is a bit of both because they're all going to kind of come together. Right now for this class, I want us just to focus on moving from the language to this, right, to this particular symbol. We're going to forget about all the stuff that happens in the basement, so all these T's and F's. So for now, we're going to just put that to the side, the drill stuff. I just want us to focus on what I just did here, that is moving from language to this. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. So we'll put the drills aside for now. Take all the stuff about the drills. It's not that it's not useful, but right now, for this class, we're just not concerned with that. And for next week, too. Okay, cool. And in next month, everything will come together. You'll see why we did all this, right? That'll be really fun. So we have here a proposition. Let's just test your terminology here. What kind of proposition is this? Jerry gets on the boat. Stop. What proposition is this? What sort of proposition? There's two types of propositions. What type is this? Dale and crew, you got it. It's an atomic proposition, right? An atomic proposition. So that's an atomic proposition because it says one basic thought, essentially, right? Not multiple ones, in which case we'd have a compound proposition. And here what we have beneath is the scheme of abbreviation. Scheme of abbreviation is a kind of a legend or reminder, right, of what stands for what. So we've decided, and this could be like, you know, Jerry gets on the boat, could be B, could be whatever. It could also be whatever, right? I could just decide that it's K, and there's no real reason for that. So long as I'm constant in my choices, everything would be just fine, right? But I'm going to decide here to choose a letter that reminds us of what it stood for. Jerry gets on the boat. This portion beneath here, that's my scheme of abbreviation, right? Jerry gets on the boat. And in the scheme of abbreviation, we only include atomic propositions, right? They'll be structured into something compound, but all we have are, for each letter stands only for an atomic proposition. We want the complicated structure to be reflected over here, but we want these parts to just be an atomic proposition. So P, that's an atomic proposition. In this case, P stands for I am signing the petition. That's an atomic proposition. It's either true or it's false. You either are signing the petition or you're not. So that's what it stands for. K, that's an atomic proposition. The events keep happening. They either keep happening or they don't keep happening. It's that simple. And anything more complicated or structural than that, we want that to be exhibited by our use of these symbols for the connectives. That's where that complication is going to show, but the individual letters stand for atomic propositions only. So if I had to symbolize this, right, Jerry gets on the boat, and I've agreed that my scheme of abbreviation is going to be this, then I just symbolize that as J. So far, so good. Again, tiny baby step reminders. We're warming up our rotator cuffs. If everything is clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. Just gradually, and we're going to get to the tough stuff in a moment. And it's good to help ourselves to the technical jargon as well, right? Because it's vital for us. We will really be using it. Okay, so for instance, imagine I have a situation. It is not the case that Jerry gets on the boat. Here's my scheme of abbreviation. J stands for Jerry gets on the boat, right? This here, is this an atomic or a compound proposition? It is not the case that Jerry gets on the boat. What are we looking at? An atomic or compound proposition? Folks are saying compound, and you're right, so you're correct, right? It's compound because at this point we have a connective, right? So that means you don't want to write Jerry does not get on the boat or something like that in here. Remember, the only thing you put in a scheme of abbreviation are the atomic propositions. Now, how do we symbolize it is not the case that Jerry gets on the boat, given that J stands for Jerry gets on the boat? How do we symbolize that? Negation J. That's right, negation J. That would be the correct answer. And notice it's a compound proposition because at this point we need to introduce a connective, right? It's a one-place connective, but it's still a connective, right? So not something, there's a space after it, right? And whatever comes in this space over here is the thing that's being negated by that symbol. Does anyone, if you've had a look, I gave you a little file and I mentioned very briefly, I think last week, does anyone remember the name of this particular little symbol? It's a negation, but what's the name of the squiggly line? Do you remember? Tilde. You got it, tilde. You got it. So this is a tilde. So you say tilde J, or for our purposes, when we talk to one another, we want to say negation J or not J. Not's just fine, right? When we talk to one another, and you're able to type in the chat. I think I've seen already some tildes, so that's just fine. Just so you know, by the way, there's limits on what we'll be able to accomplish in the chat. That's no big deal, right? So when we get to something more complicated, I'll be sort of the DJ. I'll be working on the screen, and you folks will be looking in, and we'll just zero in on what's on the screen. I'm not expecting you to write complicated symbols in the chat beyond a certain point. So that would be the correct symbolization for this. Jerry gets on the boat stands for J, and thus, if you're going to say that it is not the case that, and notice this is doing the negation work, right? This is where that negation happens over here, right? It is not the case that Jerry gets on the boat. Again, baby steps, checking in with everyone. Is everything clear, or you have a question? Slight baby steps, getting up in level of complexity now. And if you've done your homework, this should feel like baby stuff right now, right? But I'm a big believer in really making sure I don't want to leave anyone behind, and we start gradually. Get on the boat, Jerry. Atomic propositions are always positive. I think Anako, I would say yes. It's not clear what positive means, but yeah, they always assert something. That's right. They always assert. But it could be something like, let's hold on. Let's answer Anako's question, right? You could say something like, Jerry is dead, and dead is not alive. But if you use dead, right, that's what that would mean, right? Jerry is dead, right? Even though, but you never put the not in the atomic proposition. Otherwise, it's no longer atomic. So Anako, the moment you put a not, it's not atomic. So if you write don't, or doesn't get, or doesn't, oh, that's horrible. Don't get, doesn't get, right? That would be wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You can't have that in a scheme of abbreviation. J cannot stand for something that has a connective in it. So let me say that again for Anako and everyone. A capital alphabetical letter cannot stand for something which, when unpacked, has what would be a connective in it. Anako, is that clear? You want to factor that out. Borrow an expression from math. You want to factor that out. Factor it out and show it here. This is where it needs to show. Right? This is the part where it has to be clear. You want to capture this proposition with the symbols, right? But the only way to do that, and the way to properly do that, is to factor out, because we have a special symbol for that. It's over here. So you want to factor that out. Okay, cool. Get on the boat, Jerry. How do we symbolize that? Hanako, you're right. It's not a proposition. Trick question. We don't symbolize it. It's not a proposition. So what is it? If it's not a proposition, what is it? Do you remember my text message last time? Someone sent you a text message, and I went through these different sentences, and we're sort of figuring out what work they were doing. It's not a proposition. You don't symbolize it. So what is it? It's a command. It's a command, right? Do this. But that's neither true or false. Like, get on the boat, Jerry. That's neither true or false. It can either be obeyed or disobeyed, but it's not it itself. What I've got selected right now is neither true nor false. So it's not a proposition. So you don't symbolize it. All right. So that's sort of a reminder. In language, sometimes you'll get things that are mixed up. You get propositions that are rubbing elbows with questions and commands and all this other stuff that aren't actually making a claim. They're not actually making any assertion about how the way the world is, or they're not the sort of candidate things that can be true or false, right? So we don't symbolize it. So here's a good. You caught it really well, Anako and Samuel. Well done. It's a command. You don't symbolize it. All right. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question, because you'll encounter that. That's part of life, right? Real normal language mixes all that stuff up. That'd be true. It would be true if you say Jerry got on the boat. Like, let's say we find out, right? Jerry got on the boat. Then it turns out that can either be true or false. And if it's true, then he obeyed the command. And if it's false, then he disobeyed the command. But this in and of itself, this part I'm selecting right now, that is not true or false, right? And so that part you don't want to symbolize. Jerry got on the boat. That's not true. Let J stand for Jerry gets on the boat. How do we symbolize this? You got it, folks. You got it, right? Essentially, now we're saying not J. When we're saying that's not true, what do we mean by that? Right? What do we mean when we say that's not true? What's the that stand for? J. Exactly. This whole getting on the boat stuff. It's negating J. So this, would we symbolize just this? Hold on. Would we symbolize just this, what I've got selected? Yes or no? Jerry got on the boat? You're correct. We wouldn't symbolize it, and why not? That's the correct answer. Why is that the correct answer? It's a question. Because it's a question. You got it, Edric. It's a question, right? It has no truth value. It's just a question. It's almost even an exclamation, right? You could think in language, sometimes we use questions as exclamations. Holy cow, did he really do that? Like, that's not a question. Like, it's an exclamation. You're actually just surprised that so-and-so did whatever they did, right? So you will not symbolize that. However, the initial passage has us saying, that's not true. And that here picks out something specific. And so what you don't want is, you don't want a situation, this would be really silly, you don't want a situation that looks like this, right? That. And that would be sort of, no, because that doesn't stand for anything. It's an indexical term, it's context sensitive, it refers back to something, right? And in this case, it refers to specifically J. So you don't want to put something like, not that, because we know what the that stands for. It literally stands for Jerry gets on the boat, and here we're negating that. So here's an open question, but now we're actually taking a stand on that question. That's not true, so not J. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. And I want to make it a point to show you some trickier bits of language here, right? Just so that we are clear on at what point do truth values come in? At what point do we have a proposition? If you have this, given what we can unpack what the that means, then we have a proposition, right? namely not J. All right, Tom and Jerry get on the boat. T stands for Tom gets on the boat. J stands for Jerry gets on the boat. How do we symbolize? Okay. T, conjunction, J. And a quick word about notation here, right? Notice here I put my T, I keep a space. Please type a space, right? So between these two formulations, right, I want you to do the one below, not the one above. Decompress that stuff. It's visually, trust me, things are going to get really, really hard. Remember my spooky preview. Things are going to get difficult. The only way we're going to stand a chance of doing progress on these things, and the whole point, remember, I just said a moment ago, the whole point is to extend our cognitive range because our minds get screwed, right? Well, clarity is vital to that. So what we're going to do is I want everyone to agree that we're going to put a space over here between these things, right? So you don't do this. This is bad. So let me block that out. That's bad. I do not want you to do this, right? I want you to do this part over here at the bottom. Is that clear, everyone? That's a convention, but I want everyone to play by that rule book. If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. And also on that same note, you don't need to put parentheses around these things. So one of the things you saw, and luckily I don't have to explain parentheses much because you all have, just like you have a basic knowledge of English, you all have a basic knowledge of math, and the way we'll deploy parentheses is similar to math. So that is nice. I don't really have to explain. And in math, when you have something like, let's say, suppose I have to write 1 plus 2, I don't put parentheses around that. Like I don't need to put parentheses unless I'm doing something else, right? If I'm going to do 1 plus 2 times 7, then I put parentheses or something like that to make it clear what is it I'm multiplying. But you don't, if you just have this, you don't put parentheses. Well, likewise, if you have this, you don't need to put parentheses. This would be correct. It's not like you would lose points in next week's test if you added parentheses, but they are superfluous. And I would know just by seeing it that you're heading down the wrong path because you're not listening to me. And trust me, if you don't listen to Sensei Mark right now, you're going to get punched in the face when we get to that final showdown. Like all I'm teaching you precisely is to have you succeed later on when things get really, really frightening. And these micro tips really go a long way. So no parentheses here, although eventually we'll need them. In fact, we might need them here. I don't know. Tom gets on the boat, but Jerry doesn't. Same thing. T stands for Tom gets on the boat. J stands for Jerry gets on the boat. How would we symbolize that? Tom gets on the boat, but Jerry doesn't. Take your time. Give it your go, and without looking at other people, and just have again. Remember, there's no one's being graded right now, so it's no big deal. T and not J. Michael, we don't need parentheses, right? This will do just fine. So that's one of the things by doing the homework and correcting yourself, you kind of wiggle into the correct conventions, right? And notice here I've put a space, but there's no space between the not and the J. Get those tildes right up to what they negate to. That's perfectly fine. Don't put a space. This is a little harder for me to interpret and for you as well, right? Since the not ranges over the J, it's negating just the J. This is just fine, right? So T conjunction. So T, typographically, it's T, capital T, space, conjunction sign, space, negation sign, no space, and J. And this is how I'd want you to do that. That's how I did it in the answers. Basically, just keep doing what I did in the answers, right? You'll get right away a sense of what I want as far as our notational conventions so that we can all be on the same page, right? And that way, like I said, it'll be much easier when we move on to bigger specimens. My friend, is that clear? If that is clear, everyone, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. Again, we just want to be clear that what our conventions are. Like imagine if I was a doctor and you're in residence and I'm telling you, here's our conventions for handing out, like when we're doing surgery, can you hand me this? This is where we place our tools, and this, the layout of the operation room and the language we're going to use to work together to do these things is crucial. And so it's the same thing. So I'm the medical doctor, you're the student in residence, and we're going to figure out What are our conventions? This would still logically be fine, but it's like it starts to get really hard, right, to look at. This would also, again, logically not committing a mistake, but I would start getting pissed if I saw too many of these things, and it would tell me the person didn't do the homework, right? So something like this. By next week, I want all that to be done, right? So fix your homework accordingly. All right. Let's keep T to stand for Tom gets on the boat, J, Jerry gets on the boat. It is not the case that Tom gets on the boat and Jerry doesn't get on the boat. How would we symbolize that? It is not the case that Tom gets on the boat and Jerry doesn't get on the boat. Here's where it makes a difference. Look at the possibility. Like Edric wrote this, and again, I'm not concerned with who writes it. Mainly just that it's there, and it's going to be a nice illustrative example, right? Like imagine, for instance, I've got this, and imagine I've got this. So negation. Open the parentheses, right? Tom gets on the boat, and Jerry doesn't get on the boat. So this is all now hinging on. It is not the case that. Well, what does this not here range over, right? Does it range over everything that comes after, or does it range over just, it is not the case that Tom gets on the boat? It ranges over the whole thing. This is where those English intuitions that I told you about in the main document come in handy. When we say it is not the case that, right? In this particular instance, we're ranging over this entire thing. What it negates is everything here in these, that's in these parentheses over here in purple, right? This is what it's negating. This is incorrect over here. That's incorrect. Look, we use the contraction doesn't get on the boat, right? If what you really meant to say was Tom doesn't get on the boat, you'd say Tom doesn't get on the boat, right? You'd say Tom doesn't get on the boat and Jerry doesn't get on the boat. That's what that means here. So the passage I've currently got selected, that means Tom doesn't get on the boat and Jerry doesn't get on the boat. That's not what the one above is saying. The one above is saying it's not the case that previously we said Tom gets on the boat and Jerry doesn't get on the boat, negating all of that, right? Can everyone see that? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. So the one at the top here is incorrect. The one at the bottom is correct. And this is where language, this AI would, AI maybe 10 years ago would have had a harder time with this one. No problem. And again, we fine tune in this room, right? There's no big deal. No one loses any points. I'd rather okay, I see. And then we adjust accordingly. That's all we do because I want you to succeed. I don't want you to be surprised and, lose points over this stuff. So this is where a little bit of English intuitions come in, right? And so it is not the case that someone's negating what the previous person had said. Because remember the previous one here was Tom gets on the boat, but Jerry doesn't, right? And now someone's just negating that. You can always turn around and you can say not whatever anyone said, right? In fact, when I said that this wasn't the correct answer, essentially what I was saying is it's not that, right? I was negating that, as Papa Bear said, this is not correct, right? But that is the correct symbolization of that passage. And the goal is to model these targets really well, right? We have a passage of language, a fragment, and we want to model it well with the correct symbolization because then we want to do stuff with it. That's what we'll do next month, right? We'll start processing these things to figure out, once again, if the conclusion follows from the premises. If Tom gets on the boat, then the boat will sink. How do we do that? Fairly easy. If T, then S. If T, then S. That's it. T, then S. You got it. The boat will sink if Tom gets on it. How do we symbolize that? The boat will sink if Tom gets on it. Again, if T, then S. Right? Notice here, it's symbolized as the same thing we saw a moment ago, if T, then S, right? But the boat will sink, so S shows up first in the language, right? Even if it shows up first in the language, the boat will sink. Let's put it in blue because it's dropping in water, right? The boat will sink. even if that shows up first in the language, it shows up in this position, right? Because what we're saying, and remember this is an asymmetrical or unidirectional relation, it matters what's on what side. We're saying on the condition that these things happen, these other things are going to happen. Well, we're saying that the boat will sink, right, on the condition that, that's another way of putting that, that if, right, on the condition that, and what's the condition that has to be met? Tom gets on it, and what we mean by it is the boat, right? And by that we mean the T, right? And so on the condition that, this is the condition that has to be met. So be careful. Sometimes this part over here of the conditional can show up first or second in the language, but it's always showing up on this side. Now, what are the two parts here? So what's this side here called? So there's two sides to a conditional, right? What is the side that I'm selecting right now called? Has a technical name. I mentioned those technical names, and we have a file for that technical name at the top of our class, our Moodle page. The antecedent. Antecedent. That's the antecedent of the conditional. You got it. And this is called the consequent. Yeah. So you need to know this terminology because it's absolutely vital, right? The antecedent of the conditional and the consequent of the conditional. So the boat will sink. That's the consequent of the conditional, and it will sink only on the condition that, right? So on the condition that Tommy gets on the boat, and that's the antecedent. The antecedent is a technical term for the condition that has to be met in order for this thing to happen here. And you really have to sort of pay attention to the logical structure of it, because in language you could say the same thing both ways, right? You could say if Tom gets on the boat, then the boat will sink. That would be if T then S. And it's still if T then S if you say the boat will sink on the condition that Tom gets on the boat. So for instance, just to make this even more clearly, right? If you cut my head off, right, then I die, right? So I think we can all agree that that's a true conditional. If you cut my head off, then I die. So if C, then D, right? That's going to be, you can say that different ways. I could say if you cut my head off, and here I'm putting the C first for cut, right? So if you cut my head, right, then I die, right? But I can also say, I will die if you cut my head, right? Same bloody proposition. And this is where propositions are different from sentences. Different sentences, same proposition. Different sentences, same proposition, right? And that's why we have the word proposition, right? If one of them is true, then the other is true because they're equivalent. Right? So for instance, imagine that it's true, and I agree that it's true. If you cut my head, then I will die. Well, clearly the other one is going to be true as well, right? It's going to be true as well. Saying the same thing differently. I love you, you are loved by me. I punched you, you were punched by me. Same damn thing. Different sentences, same proposition. Be very, very careful. Spot the antecedent of the conditional, and the order of appearance in language is not a good predictor of what role it's going to play. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. Avneet's got it. If that's clear, type in clear. And I'm warning you because that could hurt you in the test next week if you don't pay attention. It's like, yeah, it showed up first. That must be the antecedent. It's like, no. Right? Good. All right. The boat will sink if either Tom or Jerry get on it. Tom gets on the boat, boat sinks. The boat will sink if either Tom or Jerry get on it. How do we do that? On the condition that two things now need to happen. Tom gets on the boat, right? Or Jerry gets on the boat. So it suffices that there's one, right? If those conditions are met, then the boat will sink. And notice here, the boat will sink. Once again, that's the consequent of our conditional. The consequent showed up here. Now I just want to point out the parentheses. These are crucially needed. If we did this, if we didn't have our parentheses, this would make no sense. It would be what we call, it wouldn't be what we call a well-formed formula, because we can't tell what it means, because it leaves it open that it could be two possibilities. Let me remove all of this here, right? Well, we agree what the scheme of abbreviation is. Let me have fun and make a variation on this and just move the parentheses to show you the sort of work that the parentheses do. If I say this at the bottom, what am I actually saying? Translate this, hold on for a second. Translate this in English. What in English would I be saying if I said this? It's be a weird thing to say, but it's totally sayable. That's a claim one can make. Either Tom gets on the boat, right? Or if Jerry gets on the boat, then the boat will sink. That's what I'd be saying here. So either one of these two things is going to happen. Either Tom's going to get on the boat, right? Or, and now I'm making another claim, and that claim is a conditional statement. If Jerry gets on the boat, then the boat will sink, right? Either one of those things is going to happen, perhaps both, because we're using the inclusive sense of or. Can everyone see that these are very different sentences? They're very different compound propositions. Can everyone see that? I only use a strict term, compound proposition. Can everyone see that? The parentheses matter crucially? Like crucially, right? Like it changes everything. So parentheses, they don't figure as an official notation. Like we haven't spent time, like there's no specific, like there's no truth table for parentheses, but they'll do a lot of work. They'll be with us throughout the whole thing. This would get full marks. This would get 0, right? And this would get 0 as well. So if someone did this beneath, this would get 0 because that's ambivalent. You can't really quite know what that even means. Like what's the antecedent of this conditional? Is it T or J? Or is it just J? Or like it's not clear. Like what's the antecedent? Whereas this is clear, right? And the rule of thumb is every connective, with the exception of negation, because negation is a one placeholder, so there's something that comes here. With the exception of negation, every connective is a two-place relation. That's it. Not three-place relation, two-place relation. There's one thing on one side and another thing on the other side, and that's it. So that's true here, right? Here's our connective. What's its antecedent? This whole thing is its antecedent, right? These conditions need to be met. And in this case, it's a set of disjuncts, right? So at least one needs to be met, right? So for instance, if you kill someone, right, or rob a bank, then you go to jail. That's true. That's a true compound proposition. And if you kill and rob someone, that's a possibility that's allowed by our inclusive disjunction, right? But either one of those things will get you to jail, right? This entire thing is the antecedent of our conditional, and that's my consequent. Let's pause here. Was that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. Again, just a bunch of workshopping, right? All right, so let's have a little more fun, and then we're going to keep. You can see here we're nearing the end of this particular file, but it's going to get a little harder. If Tom and Jerry get on the boat, then the boat will not sink. You can do this fairly easily. Do it. Try it. If Tom and Jerry get on the boat, then the boat will not sink. I'm going to have some fun and do it myself. Then the boat will not sink. Have fun, do it on your own, and then look at what I did. Right, fairly intuitive, right? And notice here, I didn't put a space between my tilde and my negation and my S, right? But I also don't have a space between my parentheses and my T, so no space here, right? So no space, 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 no space here, space, and so on. So just follow that. It's much, much clearer. And again, because the thing is, when you get to this, right, when these strings of symbols are going to get complicated, and they will, right, it's going to be so bloody, mind-numbing, right, to sort of sort out this kind of stuff, and it's going to be like, your eye's going to hurt. So we don't want our eyeballs to hurt. Certainly not my eyeballs. I'm old and I wear glasses. All right, it is not the case that if I do not vote for her, then there will be riots and people will die. H is I vote for her. Take your time. R, there will be riots, and D, people will die. Do it on your own and don't click. Do it on your own, but don't click the little chevron. Let everyone take the time to do it. It is not the case that if I do not vote for her, then there will be riots and people will die. Take the time to do it. Have H, R, and D stringing together properly symbolize this passage. And when I say so, everyone will click, but let's give ourselves a minute. All right, let's post that. Let's put that in the chat. And again, it's not like anyone's being graded, but it's nice to participate. Keeps your heart rate up. This is the correct answer. This is the correct answer. Anyone who didn't get that, didn't get it right. Right? And notice what we're going to do now. We're going to parse it together so we're clear on what's going on. It is not the case that, I'm going to color code this, right? It is not the case that someone's negating everything that's going to come after in this instance, right? And again, you need to read the whole to see what it is not the case that, what that negation is going to range over, right? It is not the case that if I do not vote for her, then there will be riots and people will die. So on the condition that, so if I do not vote for her, right? I do not vote for her is not H, not vote for her, not H. So if I don't vote for her, then two things are going to happen. There will be riots, R, and people will die, D. So I've been told that if I don't vote for her, there'll be riots and people will die. But you know what? I don't believe that, right? I don't believe, right? You might want to say, right? I don't believe just means, believe is a technical term which means take to be true. I don't take to be true, right? I don't believe that if I do not vote for her, notice the not here, crucial. You don't want to get it lost because there's a not here and there's a not here, but they're ranging over different things. The not that's in red ranges over this entire proposition here, this compound proposition, and the not that's in purple ranges over this atomic proposition, which is I vote for her, right? This H, I vote for her. And so you got to get these parentheses right. And moreover, we have an instance of double parentheses. As you've seen from the sheet where you have the instructions on installing your shortcut keys, I've got a convention that I use in this class to make things extra visually clear. When you get to the second set of parentheses, kind of like Russian dolls, you know, like a little Russian dolls, and there's the little fatter Russian doll that swallows the smaller one, and so on and so on. When you get to the next set of parentheses, it's much clearer if we switch the typographical characters that we use for the parentheses. Just to be clear that, you know, we've got the square bracket. It's much easier to track where it opens and where it closes. So extra kudos for anyone who's used that. Let's, for instance, Avneet, right? You're missing parentheses there. It would not be a well-formed formula. Do you see that? Like there's connectives are only relating to things, and now it's not clear. Your R is answerable to either, you know, the conditional or the conjunction. It's not clear. It's right in the middle, and we can't sort of, you know, carve it properly. And again, what's the secret to success in this class, by the way? There's like, it's really dumb. It's a no-brainer. Like, remember that at the end of my main document, I say, here's basically what you got to do in this class is you have to repeatedly practice. And so if you've done the homework all week, you're able to handle this, right? And if it's not clear, that just means you got to go back and practice some more. And by the way, it's only between you and your conscience, or you and God. Like only God knows. I haven't checked. But if you haven't done enough or enough of your homework this week, it's really time to crack the whip. The reason for that is you can't cram for logic. You need to dream of this stuff between your practice sessions so that your brain starts to sort of wrap its mind around what's going on. You should be able by 1 weekend, by today, the 16th of January, everyone should be able to do this one. If you're not, let that be a little bit of a warning to you. You should panic a little bit. Healthy panic would be good for you right now. All right? I don't believe that, or originally what did I have? I have said it's not the case that, right? It's not the case that if I do not vote for her, then there will be riots and people will die. And this captures it beautifully. And you'll notice how the structure that we have at the bottom is kind of more available to view. All right, it's a little, in some sense, clearer. That's the beauty of the symbolization stuff. All right, is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. And again, you're getting a sense of where you fit. And if you had anything other than this, it'd be 0. So this is, if this is next week, this will be a question, and this will be a question. I'll give you this. They'll have to produce this. If it's anything other than what I've currently got selected, it's 0. That's it. There's no and, ifs, or but. What would this mean? Let's have some fun, right? Given this scheme of abbreviation, what would this mean? I've removed the square brackets. Right? In English, what would that mean? It's really weird sounding. Yeah, you have this double negation. We say double negation, right? If we have a double negation, essentially what we're saying is what? Did you or did you not vote for her? If we say this, just to sort of get clear, did you vote or did you not vote for this person? Right? If I don't not vote for her, exactly, Anako, you got it. That's like, it's so painful, right? Essentially, I voted, right? And actually, I didn't vote. Like, it's if I voted. Didn't actually say I voted. Remember, this is a conditional renders this that you're not actually affirming that you voted. It's like, if I vote. So just to be clear, right? Samuel and Ako, you got it right. Essentially, what I'd be saying is, if I vote, right? If, the if matters, right? If I vote, right? Then these two bad things are going to happen, ... right? If I vote. The if matters here. You're not actually saying you voted. Once you have an antecedent, you're not committing to it. Like earlier, I had something about if you, what did I say? I said, if you cut my head, right, then I die. Did you cut my head? Yes or no? If you cut my head, then I die. Did you cut my head? No. No, you didn't. And notice, by the way, I think this is a true claim. Does anyone agree? Is this a true claim? If you cut my head, then I die? True or false? Like we know now, like you know how the world is. True or false? Cut my head, then I die. All right, cool. Let's insert a table here. Let's make 3 columns by 5 rows. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Auto fit. Window, let's do it like this. All right. If you cut my head, this is everything is way too big. I gotta change my font size here. Hold on. Let me change this. If you cut my head, this is a conditionals truth table. This is much more reasonable. If you cut my head, then I die. Let me make this. We're gonna build a little truth table for the conditional and have some fun. True, true, false, false, true, false, true, false. You've noticed from your drills, these 2 columns are always the same, right? They're always the same. You've noticed that? You don't have to commit that to memory. Like it's always the same damn thing. That part you don't need to worry about. Cool. All right. So what do we put? What do we put here? What's the this spot over here? What do we put? What truth value do we put? True. What do we put here? The second row. False. Yeah, if you've done your drills, this is just as right now, it's really easy. What about the third over here? What do we put? Oh, you got it. True. And what about here? True. Well, look, we live in world number 4, right? We live in world number 4. We live in a world where it is true that if you cut my head, then I die. Agreed? If you cut my head, then I die. We've all agreed it's true, but you didn't cut my head, and I'm not dead. So we live in this world right now. We're in world 4. It's true, right? And we're in world 4. Neither of these things have happened, but it is true that if you cut my head, then I die. You see that, Samuel? World 4? I'd have to be dead to be in world 3. Row number 3. Do you see that, Samuel? Yeah. So if you cut my head, so cut, die. If you cut my head, then I die. It's true. That's a true claim. So the whole thing is true. Can everyone see that? If that's clear, type in clear. We're in world 4, it turns out. Neither the antecedent nor the consequent are true, but the whole conditional is true. So just in case some of you thought that row was weird, we live in that world for that one. That's a possibility, right? And how do we prove that the entire conditional is false? We try to doctor conditions, Samuel, under which we'd find ourselves in world 2. right? Where you do cut my head and I'm still around, I didn't die, then you could show that our original conditional was false. You see that, Samuel? If you want to show this conditional false, if you want to show that it was wrong, you'd have to force the conditions under which you'd be in world 2. That would decisively falsify it. Yeah, that's it. But right now we live in this world, right? And it is true. You have a true conditional with a false antecedent and a false consequent. That's it. All right, let's have some fun. Either Holly or Dexter will take your call, but not both. Take your time. Don't punch it in just yet. Take your time. Either, well, not too much time. Either Holly or Dexter will take your call, but not both. Type it in, folks, when you're ready. Click, you may click. Either Holly or disjunction, Dexter will take your call, but, and but's like and, right? But it is not the case that Holly and Dexter will take your call. You got it. So, and you really, this is the only correct answer, right? Either one of these two is going to do it, but not both means, and it is not the case that you'll have a situation where both can happen. Remember, our or leaves open the possibility that both things could happen, but here we're specifying that you won't get a situation where both are going to happen. So at least one of the two are going to do it, but not both, because that'd be like you'd pay employees to, double up on needless labor, right? So either Holly or Dexter will you take your call. And moreover, I'm committing myself to this entire compound proposition, and moreover, you're never going to find a situation where both Holly and Dexter take your call, right? So let's imagine, let's take this. Was this clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask a question, and we're going to have some fun with it. Let's imagine that's a premise. So a premise is a reason that we'll accept, and we'll see where it goes. All right. Let's imagine we've accepted this as one of the reasons, right? Or you could have the other way around, Edric. So here's one of the possibilities. It wouldn't match as clear as cleanly the language fragment that we need to model, but you could have a situation like this, Edric, and it would be fine. Hold on, look what I'm doing. I'm going to move this around. Both of these say the same thing. So Edric, do you see that? Is that what you had in mind? The one at the bottom and the one at the top, both would be fine. Yeah, there's arguably, though, the one at the top is more intuitive. The one is more intuitive. Now, when I say that both are equivalent, hey, I'm going to make use of a really cool symbol that we know and love. Look at what I'm doing. I'm going to put this all on a string. Let me shrink the size of it a bit. There we go. So the moral of the story is this is equivalent to that because our conjunction is symmetrical. You can swap both sides, right? Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt says the same thing. You can swap it around, right? Did you like that, my friends? I'm actually using one of the connectives that we have to sort of capture the moral of what I just explained, right? Yeah, says the same thing. Says the same thing. Sounds a little scary when you look at it, but it's actually, yeah. No, you can't type that as an answer because what is this here? This is a conjunction with two conjuncts, and now you're saying something completely different. Now your claim is a different claim about the two being equivalent. That is not at all what you have at the top. Do you see that, Edric? So this would be an incorrect answer to the because we're trying to model a passage. It was not a good way to model a passage. That's not at all what the portion I've selected is saying. You see that, Edric? So it is the moral of the story of our conversation between you and I, but it is not the passage I've asked you to model. Is needlessly huge, right? That is not what it's saying. Yeah, cool. It is not what it is saying, right? So there you go. All right, so let's go back to where I was. Let's say this is a premise, and I've accepted that either Holly or Dexter will take your call, and it won't be the case that Holly and Dexter take your call. And let's accept as another premise, right, that Holly took your call, let's say. Now we're zeroing in on arguments here. What would be the conclusion? So I've just said that either one but not both, and it turns out Holly took your call, so what's the conclusion? Not Dexter. It's not going to be Dexter in light of those premises. You did it. That was a nice inference. You've inferred the conclusion from the premises, right? And here's where we're going to learn tools next month to figure out whether that's correct, right? But it's neat that you can actually start reading these things properly, right? It's either one or the other, but not both. It turns out it was Holly, so it's not going to be Dexter. And if I would have said this, for instance, let's have some more fun, right? Imagine I say it's not Dexter. What would be the conclusion that you can infer from this? So if I say it's not Dexter, then it's going to be Holly. Exactly, it's going to be Holly. Exactly. So this would be an argument. What you have here is just a compound proposition, but when you start stringing together compound propositions as premises, you can just start to draw conclusions. And conclusions can be atomic or compound. There's no particular constraint on that. Yeah, terrific. Let's have some fun with this one. Take your time, and I'm going to reconvene at 11:20 when people are going to type in their answer. Your parents will buy you a car. The reason for this is that your parents will buy you a car if, that is, you graduate with distinction. However, if your parents are not honest, then what I've just said will not be true. Luckily, you graduated with distinction and your parents are honest. Good for you. Now, here's the thing. When we do premises and conclusion, by the way, we're going to separate them like this. So remember earlier, these were the premises? Actually, it feels like I have a few notations I need to introduce before we do this. Instead of separating the premises like we just did, right, like I just did here, what we're going to do is we're going to put them all on a one row, right? And we're going to do space, space, single slash, space, 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 double slash, space, space, like this. So we're going to end up with our argument is going to look like this on a horizontal row, and we'll use a single slash to separate the premises and a double slash to separate the conclusion from the premises, right? So this will be our entire argument, for instance, right? This would be the first premise of the argument. This would be the second premise of the argument, and this would be the conclusion of the argument. Always the conclusion on the right side of that horizontal string. And all I'm introducing now are just these separators, single separator, so single slash, double separator to separate the conclusion from the premises. Is that convention clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. Really straightforward. And there's a reason why it's horizontal. You'll see that next month, right? Because we're going to go underneath the hood. We're going to have some fun with these things after. Okay, cool. So actually, we'll walk through this one, right? Your parents will buy you a car. The reason for this is that your parents will buy you a car if, that is, you graduate with distinction. However, if your parents are not honest, then what I've just said will not be true. Luckily, you graduated with distinction and your parents are honest. Good for you. Well, we can already trim that. Do we agree? Do we have to symbolize this? Yes or no? Good for you. No, we don't have to symbolize that. That's an exclamation. All right, so trim that. Like, who cares? We can already trim that, right? I'm just going to remind us that it was there, right? But we're just going to put it out of sight. Now, here we have an argument. Someone's saying something and giving reasons for it. What's the main point of this? Someone emails you this. What's the main point they're trying to make? What's the conclusion they're trying to establish? Parents will buy you a car. The reason for this is that blah, 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 blah. They're trying to prove what? They're trying to prove something. What are they trying to prove? They're trying to prove that your parents will buy you a car. Exactly. They're trying to prove that your parents will buy you a car. That's the conclusion. Right? That's the conclusion. Your parents will buy you a car. Why, Samuel? Well, The reason for this is, and notice here now, this is basically announcing that what comes after are going to be the premises, right? The reason in place, in fact, there's reasons, right? You might want to put an S. The reason for this is that, and then you've got all of this stuff over here, and these are going to be your premises. Now we know that the conclusion is going to be your parents will buy you a car. So what's going to go on the right-hand side of the double slash? What are we going to put here? Yeah, given our scheme of abbreviation, we're going to put B. Your parents will buy you a car. Why? Kyung, Weishama, why are you saying this? That's terrific. Like someone could just email you this, right? Your parents will buy you a car. You know, like that doesn't help you. Why should you believe it? What are the reasons given to believe this proposition? Well, here are the reasons given, right? All of this. Now take your time and fill out this. Okay, so fill that out. And remember, if you have a premise separated with a slash double space, have some fun. Fill this out. And I don't know that there are two premises here. Who knows how many premises there are going to be, right? Try your best. Have some fun with this one. I'm throwing you at the wolves now. Take your time. Let's say at 11:25, we'll check in with people's answers. So you got like take 5 minutes to try to do it on your own. And if you can't do it in the chat bar, I'm more concerned with you trying than with you showing off your answer. So open up a file somewhere and do it on a separate file. So your shortcut keys will definitely work better on a Word file, for instance. Open up a Word file. Take your time. We've got an additional 5 minutes and we'll have a look at what folks have said. If you're lost, type in lost. If you're not, keep going. And there's no shame. We want to check in with everyone. This is just practicing. We're working out. I'm running my dojo like a benevolent sensei. No one falls behind. Slightly lost. Keep at it, though. Okay, cool. If you think you got it, I'd rather you muddle through as best as you can, even if you F up. It's no big deal. You'll learn more that way. Now pause, everyone. Pause, 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 pause. I don't want to see any activity in the chat. Okay. I'm going to do something from this moment onward, and I always do this. Hold on, Gusharanjit. Premises are going to be separated. So remember, we asked a moment ago, right? How many premises are they going to be? I'm going to institute a convention, and I always do this, right? That we're going to gloss as premises anything that's a complete sentence that starts with a capital letter and ends with a period. So for instance, this here, your parents will buy you a car if that is you graduate with distinction. That would be premise number one. right? However, if your parents are not honest, then what I've just said will not be true. Starts with a capital letter, ends with the period. That will be a second premise. We'll agree that premises are basically going to carve out as our punctuation does. Luckily, you graduated with distinction and your parents are honest. We're going to agree that that's a premise, right? Because it starts with a capital letter and ends with a period. So now I've kind of pre-chewed that for you. You're going to have three premises. And for the next test and the homework, if it starts with a capital letter and ends with the period, you're going to carve that as a premise. Resume your work. Get back to work. Gersharanjit, go back to the drawing board and work. Same for everyone. So we're going to have three premises. We're going to take them step by step after. Let's give ourselves 2 more minutes. And if I need to see some activity, okay, we're back to having activity in the chat. Terrific. 2 more minutes, and then we'll click on the chevron, see what we have, and then we'll workshop that stuff together. Yeah, premises are separated with a single slash. That's right, Hanako. So like I've got here, right, single slash. Yeah. Visually very easy to spot, especially when you do double space. Hanako, you're doing great. Everyone's doing great so far. Remember, showing up and doing great in class is only half the battle. It's actually a fifth of the battle. The homework is what matters most. Okay, click on the send button. Click on the little chevron when you're ready. So Anako, for your first and second premise, you've got needless parentheses. So you could trim those. You see that? They're not hurting you, but again, I didn't check whether you got it correctly. We haven't done that work together. At a glance, I think you got it. But you've got needless parentheses. So anyone seeing Hanako's, and then we make mistakes publicly and we're going to work on this stuff. It's no big deal. We're just learning. Terrific. Beautiful. Yeah. All right. So let's do this one step at a time. And I'm just having a quick glance at where people are. Gives me a sense. There's nothing different about an argument, right? Our second homework than our first homework. An argument just is more of the same. So you ought to know how to symbolize a compound proposition because that's what you've been working on all week. So let's just take this. That's our first premise. Your parents will buy you a car if, that is, you graduate with distinction. That's our first premise. What would that look like? Type again. I know I've seen your full answers, but type again just for that. What would be the first premise? Your parents will buy you a car if, or on the condition, that is, that you graduate with distinction. That's right. If you graduate with distinction, that's not what I wanted to do. If you graduate with distinction, then your parents will buy you a car, right? If G, then B, that's our first premise. Full stop. And here, note, the reason for this is that's announcing that we have premises, but that's not part of the premise itself, so you can trim that out. That's our first premise. If G, then B. So if you graduate with distinction, then they buy you a car. It's not if B, then G. It's if G, then B. Is that first premise? Let's take it step by step. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. Divide and conquer. We'll do this in steps. If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. Beautiful. And I'm glad folks said if G, then B, not if B, then G, right? You don't want to end up saying if I buy a car, then all of a sudden I spontaneously graduate with distinction. It doesn't work that way. That's a very different claim. In fact, the second one would be implausible. So here the antecedent of the conditional is spoken after. Good. So that's our first premise. Let's just put that over here, right? That's one and done. All right. Second premise starts with a capital letter, ends with a period. However, and that you can kind of trim the however, if your parents are not honest, then what I have just said will not be true. Now, in order to figure that out, we need to understand what I have just said. What does that mean? What does that pick out, what I have just said? What have you just said? What I have just said. What the hell does that stand for? It stands for if, yeah. If G, then B. That's what you just said. Remember, that's what you just said, quite literally. Okay, cool. So given that, what would be the second premise? If your parents are not honest, then what I have just said will not be true. So if your parents are not honest, so if not honest, then, so implication, conditional, right? It won't be the case of what I just said. So if G, then B. And so if your parents are not honest, they're not honest, then what I have just said, notice what I'm selecting here, will not be true. So now you turn around and you negate that. Can everyone see this? And now look, what I've just said, I put it in orange. I'll just put it all here. That's the part in orange, right? What I have just said is over here. Is the second premise clear, everyone? And if you've effed up on the first go around, the second go around hopefully is falling into place. Is that clear? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask a question. If something's not clear, just say it. We'll sort of iron it out. We're workshopping this stuff. Nice. You folks are doing great. And I'm going to take step by step, right? If your parents are not like, if you do the whole thing, it's scary. Do we agree, folks, that if you look at this whole thing, it's much scarier than when you break it into parts? Do you agree with me? I'm like that. Like, I find that frightening. That's like if you give me an elephant, you say, eat it all. I'm like, no. But if you give me little bits at a time, I'm like, yeah, I can do this. Don't show me the whole. It's frightening. You're scared. Like, I can't. So chop it up. Like if you could eat an elephant, just chop it up into bits and just take it one thing at a time. All right, so good. So that's terrific. We did that. Yeah, it's too scary, too much at once. We'll deal with it one premise at a time. Terrific. What's our next and final premise? Luckily, you graduated distinction when your parents are honest. So the luckily part, you can trim all that. So luckily, well, screw that. You graduated with distinction and your parents are honest. What would that look like? Graduated with distinction, so G, and conjunction, your parents are honest. Terrific. Man, that's, you want to live in that world, right, where both conjuncts are true. That's terrific, right? Therefore, and the conclusion was what? Your parents will buy you a car. The B, good for you, right? And the good for you is because we've established the conclusion, and the conclusion is that your parents will buy you a car. Here's another convention I'm going to do. So now I'm going to put all of this in black. First of all, we're going to check whether or not we got the right answer. Here I go. Hey, look, it was already there. I put it in white as a kind of a solution. Notice this. We did it. We did it. That's exactly it. And notice if I follow the recipe, the number of spacing, the symbols I use, double space before the slash, it is literally identical to the one I already had on my file. Like I got it correctly. Right? I'm going to introduce a convention. I've already introduced one convention that makes your life easier. Premises, we'll identify them in the order in which they show up, and they always start up with the capital letter and end with the period. That way we can kind of slice them this way, right? We can kind of slice them this way, right? And so on. Like if it starts with a capital letter and ends with a period, that's a premise, right? Or a compound proposition at any rate, that's how we carve them. Here's another convention that I'm going to abide by, not necessarily for your homework, because I want you to practice at a level that's a little higher than the test, but for the test. I will always put the conclusion at the end. Right? So we'll say something like, therefore, your parents will buy you a car. And because we're not spending a lot of weeks on this, technically what I want you to develop is the skill of spotting the conclusion, right? Spot the main point of the whole argument. But I will, just because we want to do this in a feasible amount of time, I will, for the test, always put the conclusion at the end, right? So you'd have all your premises here, and you'd have your conclusion there. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. I'm just going to lower the difficulty level just a bit, just so that you'll be aware the conclusion doesn't always have to be at the end, but because we want to get this done, and I really want you to focus on the symbolization itself, but one of the skills you want to have is to spot the conclusion. Terrific. Okay. So there you have it. You did terrific. And this is the kind of skill we'll need for next month, because then we're going to start having fun underneath. There's all sorts of things we have to establish whether or not, like our intuitions right now. Do you think this is a good or a bad argument? Do you think it's a valid argument or a bad one? Like based on your intuitions, like informal logic now, your reasoning skills in English or ordinary language. a good or a bad argument? The reason for this is that, well, actually, we'd have to start with your parents will buy you a car. Let's reread. Your parents will buy you a car if you graduate with distinction. However, if your parents are not honest, then what I've just said won't be true. Luckily, you graduated with distinction and your parents are honest. Therefore, your parents will buy you a car. Does this conclusion actually follow from the premises, according to you? Use your gut feeling on this one. Will your parents buy you a car based on those reasons that were given? Yeah, it would. The thing is, though, right? We all have this gut feeling. Like most, you read it carefully and you say, yeah, of course that follows, right? This would be an email from a friend or a text message or a tweet, right? But now prove it. And that's what we're going to learn to do, right? Because, like, how do you know you're right? You feel right, but feeling right doesn't make you right. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to prove that stuff, right? Because there's no guarantee you're right, by the way. Just because you feel like you're right doesn't mean you're right. Okay, good. Hey, I said we would do some practice together. Was this helpful, everyone? Let me check in with everyone. We're doing great for time. Was this helpful, everyone? We started with little things, and by the end, it got a little harder. But, like, that's what we do. Good. Okay, we're having a good workout, by the way. Another good one. So this is another great Monday. Take it one Monday at a time. Difficult, but it's right. And how do we make it less difficult, Edric and everybody else? There's this no-brainer way in this class to make things less difficult and more easy and to get used to it. There's only one trick. Doesn't matter what your IQ is. Repetition, practice at home, practice, practice, practice. It solves everything. Practice on your own, then check the solutions. Wax on, wax off. That's right. And the thing is, crucially, do the homework without looking at the solutions. If you just look at the solutions, you are screwed. So I'm going to say this. All right, I've said this in the main document at the end. I'm going to say it again because this is really crucial. I did have a glance at what some people were writing, and some of the stuff isn't that solid. So I'm going to reiterate my warning because I love you. All right, so here we are. I'm going to say it one more time. Repeated practice is essential to success in logic. If you just look at the screen passively as if this was YouTube, same for your PDFs, if you just look at them, but you don't actually type, then you will fail. Even if you indulge in that laid-back approach only once. Indeed, falling behind by 1 week can derail your whole term. So do all the homework that you're supposed to do the week that you're supposed to do it. All right? So don't just look at the screen, you have to do it. Okay, so that means when you do the homework, do it on your own before and then grade yourself. Then you grade yourself. Don't just look at the solutions. That's not at all going to improve you, right? And so you got to do it on your own at the risk of screwing up. You know, in Batman Begins, my favorite line is, it's like, Master Wayne, why do we fall? To learn how to pick ourselves up. It's like we get better by screwing up and by making mistakes. So you have to go out there and you have to take a risk and you have to open up a file and you have to make mistakes. Then you have to find out that you did a mistake and why you made a mistake. That's the only way you're going to learn. All right. On that note, let's have a look at the first symbolization homework because I had said that I would leave room for that. I believe it was Anako and some other folks that said they've had questions. This is now going to be the time to do it. I'm going to open up the homework. If you've done, and you must have done the homework, tell me which argument you want to look at. And what the issue was. We're going to have a look at that right now. So now we're workshopping the first homework. If you've done your homework, you should have specific questions where you got stuck and why. Can everyone see the first homework on the screen right now? Typing yes if you can see it. Cool. That's the first homework with the solutions. All right. So someone tell me a particular argument, a particular question that you want to look at. There weren't arguments at this stage. There were just propositions. And which one? All right. Alexander says 47. I'm taking a bunch of suggestions and then I'll put them in order. So this is the time. Here I am. I'm your personal trainer. We're going to do this together. So if you were stuck on one of them, you weren't sure, tell me the number and then I'll go from the smallest number first and we'll work our way up. I've got 46. I've got 47, 49. Cool. Thank you, Edric, for reminding me the unless. 43. Okay. Let's give 30 more seconds for people to go over their notes. And again, if you want to make the most of this class, you have to take notes. 48, so near the end. Most people's near the end. 43 is the smallest number I've got so far. Okay, cool. And let's do 43 then. Okay, so again, take the time. Ask me, because otherwise I'll get to 43. Let me give it, folks, 20 seconds. Go over your homework if there was something you weren't clear. And I'll do my best. I can't guarantee, but I'll do my best to make everything is clear. Make sure everything's clear. All right, so far we've got 43. Anako's asking about 43. I don't even remember what these things are, so we're going to have to look at them again. Can everyone see 43 clearly on the screen right now? If you type in yes, I've got it selected. Unfortunately, I can't zoom in between. Like, that's about as good as it gets. I hope that's not too small. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit more. See, if I zoom in, that's not bad. Okay, that's not bad. Let me just move that over here. All right. If the weather is good and we leave early, commas are kind of nice, right? So if these two conditions are met, if G and E, so both things have to happen, and we leave early, then here's these things that are going to happen. Then if we don't hit any bad traffic, so here's another clause now that has to be met, right? If we don't hit any traffic, we will arrive on time. Notice here, you don't need a then, but we could write one here, right? The word then in English doesn't always have to be there, right? So Anako was asking this, but doesn't matter. We're all paying attention to this right now, and I want to point that out. An if-then claim isn't always showing up with the words if and then in English. Sometimes you don't get the then. Sometimes you don't even get the if, right? So by the way, it could be like worded differently. Look, on the condition that you chop my head off, I die. Well, that's if you cut my head off, then I die, but I didn't say if and I didn't say then. But you could have a then here that would make perfect grammatical sense. We will arrive on time. So if these two conditions happen, then, and then you have this other sub situation, right? If we don't hit any bad traffic, then we will arrive on time. Hanako, can you zero in and tell me what your concern was, or did that make it clear? If I didn't really let me know what your concern was, but if that caught it, then that's great. And if you had another concern in that, just let me know which one it was. Let me zoom back up then. Question 23, I wrote the answer. Oh, but there's a bunch of, okay, I see what you're saying, Hanako. All right, okay, I see it. So let me just grab, I think I can copy paste, but let me just grab what Anako said. Thank you, Anako, for reminding me, because these things disappear from view, my friend, once folks type. So Anako is asking this, and Anako, let me see if I captured your worry, and I used copy paste here, so it's the wrong symbols. But Anako, you're wondering, why would this one here, let me put it in green, why would this one in green be correct and this one here be incorrect? Right? Is that what your concern is? If I got that, just tell me if I understand the concern. Okay, cool. Well, these are different claims, by the way, right? And one of the things is, this is where we want to, and symbolization gets a little tricky, we really want to model the intent that's here, right? Even if you could show, and I don't know that you could show this, but even if you could, and this would be an interesting exercise, even if you could show that these two statements are identical. So let me put now these things in bracket. And even if we could show that these two things are equivalent, that is, that this way of saying things is the same as this way of saying things. And next week, we'll actually learn, 2 weeks, we'll learn a way to actually test that, which will be really, really cool. Even if they were logically equivalent, which is not a given, I don't know how my intuitions feel about this, arguably the one in green captures the passage of English more closely, because we do use an if, right? And there's not an and another additional clause. If you really what someone wanted to say was, these three conditions have to be met before we arrive on, in order for us to arrive on time, they would have said as much. You see that, Anako and Samuel? And I'm glad Samuel has the same concern as Anako. If really someone intends on saying, these are the three conditions that need to be met for this further state of affairs to occur, they would say it as much. What we're getting is something different. We are using the conditional structure again. And you want to capture that. I need to see two if-thens in there, because there are two if-thens. There's two conditions. Like the if is showing up twice. And that's why the green would be preferable. Even if, let's say, it could be shown, and I don't know, we haven't shown it, right? And I'm a little too tired and vegged out to tell by intuition, right, whether or not the two formulations are equivalent. Samuel and Anako, do you see that? Like, you want to honor the fact that if showed up twice. And then I'll say a little story for that in a moment, why that matters, right? They could be, yeah, if we build a truth table, you could do it. But remember, yeah, and Anako, the thing is right now, we're not doing strict formal logic. We're kind of doing a hybrid because we're passing from the informal to the formal, and we want to model that thing correctly, right? And so you go back to the thing you're trying to model. So the language gives you a direction. So if you have these two competitors and you formulated these two and you're not sure which, the tiebreaker is which one actually models the grammar you were actually given and assigned to model. Samuel, does that make sense? I'll give you an example in just a moment. I'll make up an example on the cuff, and hopefully that'll really make it clear, right? If you cut my head, then I die. Remember this one? Everyone loves this one because it involves cutting a prof's head, and that's never a fun. That's always a good thing, right? If you cut my head, then I die, right? If you cut my head, then I die. Let's say cutting the head is C. Let's have everyone, not copyright, C, right? Then I die, D. Everyone remind me, how do we symbolize that? Right, if C, right, then D. Okay, now here's where, and this is for Anako and Samuel and everybody else, right? I know for a fact that I'm not too vegged out to find out, right? I know for a fact, for instance, that this is equivalent to saying it is not possible that you have a situation where you both cut my head and I don't die. So this here and this here, I know for a fact are equivalent statements, right? So this and this, these are equivalent statements. They're saying exactly the same thing, right? And one of the reasons for that is you'll see in month 3, this is actually one of the, what we call a theorem that you'll have to commit to memory, right? So to say, if you cut my head, then I die, that is equivalent to saying there's no possibility where you cut my head and I don't die. I'm committing that I'm not in row 2 of that truth table, right? Now, let's go here for a second. I'm going to ask Samuel and Anako, all right? Clearly, of the two formulations we have here, though they're equivalent, the one at the top and the one at the bottom, which one best models the passage in purple? Top or the bottom one? I've got a passage in model. Yeah, the top one clearly models that best. Hanako, do you agree? Clearly that's closer. Yeah. Yeah, no worries. And so the task this month is different. The task isn't just come up with anything you want, and so long as it's logically equivalent to the right answer, it's fine. The task is model the passage correctly, because here's another possibility to really, really bring that home. Do we all agree that this would also be logically correct? Do we agree? Type in agree if you agree. Yeah, but you're departing from the language now significantly, right? And yeah, you could do a bunch. Exactly, that's my point, Samuel, right? We could keep doing this. And you know what? When you know logic, you realize you could do this. And this is a kind of, if you know Noam Chomsky and his work in generative grammar, this would be interesting. There's an infinity of formulations, Samuel. An infinity. You realize that? There's an infinity of logically equivalent ways of stringing together the symbols. So, like, now what's the tiebreaker? Well, well, you have to pick the one that is closest, and the one that I gave you earlier was closest. Now let's go back to Anako's concern for, and I'm happy to sort of really expound on these things, because I don't want you to say it's just because I said so, Anako, because I'm a philosopher and that's like a cardinal sin for me, right? Anako and everybody else. Is that ultra clear, my friends? Why that was the right one? Like, I'd rather take 5 minutes and give you reasons than take 2 seconds and say, just because I said so, right? Yeah. Cool, terrific. All right, so that was 43. Scrolling back here, what we had was, I believe, near the end, 48, 49. All right, cool, let's do this. Let's go to 48. Who wanted to have a look at 48? Remind me again. Avni, all right, terrific. And Gurashanjit, okay, cool. All right, let's have a look. Again, we'll have to relook at it fresh. It is water. which means it will freeze if we chill it to 0 degrees Celsius and boil if we heat it to 100 degrees Celsius. All right, so this is interesting. It's water. To say that something is water just is to say, or is equivalent to saying, like you might want to say, here's a definition in the dictionary. So imagine, for instance, let me just copy paste this. What we could say this is the equivalent sign, right? Is what we have normally when we have, for instance, a definition in a dictionary. When you have a definition in the dictionary, you have these two dots over here. And on one side, you have the word you're trying to define. And on the other side, this is the word you're trying to define. And here's the thing that is your definition. To put the two dots, just say, you can trade the one word for this long description, or you could trade this long description for the one word. It's a biconditional. So by the way, everyone, dictionaries, those two dots, this is the logical work that they do, all right, essentially. So you might want to say, here's the definition of it. It's a liquid that will freeze if we chill it to 0 degrees Celsius. So that's one of the things. If you chill it to 0 degrees Celsius, it freezes. And there's also an interesting property, namely its boiling point. If you heat it, then it boils. So if you chill it, then it freezes. And if you heat it, then it boils. And that's what you end up with. Avni, what was your concern? Is that clearer now? What was your concern? And again, this really captures what we're saying. Even if logically you could perhaps find something that'd be equivalent, this really hugs it as close as we can hug it. Hopefully that may have made it clear. We'll let Avneet let us know, and everybody else, just again, we play along, everyone benefits, right? It's the one we're looking at. Actually, I'll remove all this clutter here, just so it's not in our view. So put all this white so that we can see which one we're working on. It's too zoomed in. Sorry, folks. And Avneet's going to clarify whether or not that makes sense. And which means, right? Which means that, yeah. Oh, for the equivalence, yeah. So this is okay. So this is your concern. All right. So which means it, right? So this means like, which means that, and it's back and forth, right? Which means that is equivalent to saying that. And so this is again a little sort of English thing. And if English is not your first language, then maybe you would have sort of not seen that. But yeah, now you can just know, oh, that's basically what the intent is, right? Yeah. It goes both ways, right? If you've got a liquid that has these two things, then you know you've got water. If you've got water, it should have these properties. The scientist who goes on a different planet and wants to find out, like we send a probe on another planet and we find out what the liquid is, right? You do these conditions. It's a test for figuring out what water is, right? And you can infer both ways. Right? That's why there's the double arrow here. If you've got a liquid that meets these conditions, right, that is it. So, I mean, look, I've got a great way of making that clear. Let's have some fun. Avneet and everybody else. Do you agree, Avneet, that I could have said it is water? So if it will freeze, or this liquid, let's just say this liquid, hold on, right? This liquid will freeze if we chill it to 0 degrees Celsius, comma, and it will boil if we heat it to 0 degrees Celsius, which means, and this was the expression that was causing people, which means it is what? Finish that sentence for me. Which means it is. Which means it is water, right? So that's why it can go both ways, right? If you've got these conditions, then it's water. And if it's water, then you've got these. So antecedent, consequent can swap both ways because there's no longer a conditional here, right? It goes both ways. Cool. And I'm glad, Avneet, that clarified things. Yeah. Yeah. Which means that ignore, I would pay a little closer attention because sometimes it can pick out a conditional. So ignore in some instances, right? It could be a situation like this, right? It can mean a therefore, actually. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It means could be a therefore, right? So it could be like Mark's head got chopped off, which means that he will die. I've said that we're not going to carve premises and conclusion in this manner, but this would mean this, right? Mark's head got chopped off, so chop off, it would be something like this, right? Which means that he will die. And the implicit premise here would be that if C, then D. which is implicit. So normal language stuff doesn't always state its implicit premises. So you can't guarantee that because you say which means that you've got a biconditional or equivalence. But in this instance, it did. So ignore. That's the only thing I can say about that. Yeah, look at the context. Look at the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah. And again, notice, by the way, if you've ever wondered why it took so long for AI to be good with language, like ChatGPT's changed everything, right? I think we've turned that corner. But the reason why is all this stuff, right? It's not obvious to transform. And if you want to read philosophy of language, read Ludwig Wittgenstein speaks a lot about rule following. The rules that we follow in language are not always stated. They admit of exceptions, and it's not clear when the exceptions apply, when they don't, and so on. And we're able to deploy normal language, whether it's Punjabi or English or Japanese or whatever, right, in a way that's not obvious to make sense of, which is why it's taken so long to sort of track that. So that was 48. We also had 49. Am I right? Who wanted to have a look at 49? And we're doing great, by the way. Oh, the unless stuff. Yeah, cool. Unless. Thank you, Edric. Okay, cool. And again, folks, you have to understand. Remember, I'm trying to do a lot of things at once, and it's kind of hard. So thank you for reminding me. I really appreciate the reminders. All right, let's have a look at this unless stuff. We will have a great game unless, that is, it rains. Notice here I put the or in normal English because I really want to show you that there's two alternative ways of rendering that one, and in this case both would be fine, right? Unlike earlier where the passage that we're trying to model clearly adjudicated which one was the preferable symbolization, in this case both, and it really depends on the person, capture intuitively what's going on, right? We're not going, if it doesn't rain, then we're going to have a great game, right? And if it rains, then we're not going to have a great game. This person is committing to a great game, but the only thing that could screw that up is the rain. These capture them both equally. And Edric, now this is really a case of if you gave me either or in an exam, you'd get full marks. I'm fine with the unless unpacking either way. Is that clear, Edric? Like this is one where I can't really say this one's preferable to the other. Like, I don't know about you, which one grabs you better? Let's take a little survey of people. Like, which one do you think captures it better? Yeah, it goes, yeah, whichever would be fine. The second or the first, which one do you think? Let's do a poll. If it doesn't rain, then we're going to have a great game, pal. This is what that would mean, right? Like, think about it. If it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain. It's interesting. See, it's really kind of right down the middle. It's not clear, right? Then we are going to have a great game. That's what that says. And this one says, man, we'll have a great game. If it rains, like this one says, if it rains, then our game is screwed. Sorry, I'm having some fun here, right? You got to keep it excited. And if someone said these things, let me put this formulation here. Let me put this formulation here. And let me put this formulation here, right? They'd be all saying the same thing, right? Like read these intuitively. Like let me just remove all the clutter here and just use your ordinary intuitions for a second and just read the ones in bold. We'll have a great game unless, that is, it rains. Man, like have some fun. You put some flourishes because it looks more real. Man, if it doesn't rain, then we are going to have a great game. And that'd be fine, right? Because that's still a proposition, even if you do that. If it rains, then our game is screwed, right? This still captures all of those things, and both are fine. Both are fine in this case. And you've seen from the survey here, it's really unclear which intuitions are. So the unless is one of those ones and that's why I put it near the end. My friends, was this helpful? We're at the last question or the second to last. Is there everything good? If that was helpful, type in helpful. If there's something further you want from homework 1, let me know. So helpful, type in helpful. If there's something more, go ahead, last call for homework 1. Because I've still got the file up there. We can still workshop that thing. Yeah. And as always, the fix is more homework, and homework is really easy. It's both work and it happens at home. So can't do it here, and it's going to be work. It's going to be hard. And by the way, it's normal if it's hard, right? right? That's the point. If you feel like you're struggling, that's a helpful thing. But spread it out. Please try, and again, notice here between sort of rounds here, I'm giving you advice. Earlier, I told you about how don't just look at the solution sheets. That's guaranteed to fail. Another piece of advice is spread your week's work evenly throughout the week, because you need, so here's the thing, right? Here's your brain, right? And you can imagine your brain has the conscious part and the unconscious part. Well, actually your brain doesn't have actually parts that way. It carves into, right hemisphere and left hemisphere. But let's say you have the part that's the conscious part. This is the part when it's daytime, right? This is when there's the sun. This is when you're sleeping. Let me draw a little sunshine here. Yay, it's sunshine, right? And this is nighttime. Hopefully you sleep at night, right? This is a little moon. That's the unconscious works at night when it's still around in the day. But this is when you process deep skills. And our goal is to take a skill, to teach it consciously. Like here I am, that's the S, that's the skill. I'm the prof, I'm teaching it to you consciously. You're awake, you're caffeinated, you ate food, you're paying attention, okay. But we want that skill to go all the way down deep into your subconscious or your unconscious. And the way to do that is to sleep. You need to sleep between workouts. That's when you dream. And dreaming just is you processing the day's information and making it a deep acquisition of skills. If you don't spread your homework throughout the week, that means you have a bunch of work that you're doing like this during the daytime, and then it's the test, and you're screwed. What I want you to do is work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep, work. How many dots did I make here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's the test. Well, here's the thing. Same amount of work, technically speaking. There were 5 dots here and 5 dots here. You'd think 5 is 5, right? The person's going to perform better, same performance. No. The person who distributed that work at the bottom will do much better in the test T than the person at the top because they slept in between. So please spread out your work. It's less stressful per day. You have less to do. And that means you acquire the skills in your sleep and you're going to do better at the test, right? So spread out throughout the week. Yeah. And remember, Samuel, I mean, you've taken other courses with me. Guess what, guys? Remember, I'm not a logician. I'm actually, logic for me is a kind of a side gig. I'm a philosopher of mind and I do cognitive science and so on. And you want to be informed by a proper conception of what sort of animal that you are. And you're the dreaming animal. You're an animal that cannot cram. I'm sorry, it's just not possible, right? And so please distribute the work as a model below, not the model above. That way you'll do well in the test. And if you do poorly in the test, and you say, but professor, I did all the questions. I'll be like, but did you sleep in between? Right? And that makes all the difference. My friends, is that clear? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. Like I'm your sensei and I care. Like I don't want to fail anyone because it sucks to fail people every semester. Holy cow, it sucks. It's logic, a third. I think last time I taught this, like a third of the class failed. Like, what the heck? I don't want that to happen. I'm a great teacher. And even if I am, are you a great student? This makes me laugh. People go and say, I didn't do well. He's a bad teacher. But are you a good student? Like, rate my student. It's like, you suck, man. You didn't do the work. Your prof loved you, and all you did was you just like crammed, right? And you didn't do your work. It's like, yeah, it's on you, pal. All right, second symbolization homework, my friends. It's 12:03. We get to at least start it together. Is everyone still good to go to have a look at the second homework? If you're good to go, tell me GTG. We still got some energy, right? We got some consciousness left. Sounds good. Let's do this. You good to go? I'm good to go. Let's bloody do this. Let's do the second symbolization homework. Let's have a look. All right, so it'll be less scary if we start it together. Let me just move this over here. Let me zoom in. Can everyone see that? If you can see that, type in yes. All right. Well, now we've introduced some new notation, just so you know, right? We've got these new symbols we know. Oops, sorry. This and this. This is horrible. Hold on. This is skip paragraph crap. Hold on. Page break before. All right. This is so annoying. All right. We've got these new symbols. What does the single slash separate? Just remind us. Good. What does the double slash separate? What's on the right side of the double slash? conclusion, right? So you have premise, premise. How many spaces do we put in between here? One or two? Two spaces, please. Give extra space, okay? Two spaces. Could we ever find a situation where you have conclusion on this side of the little things? Do we ever have a situation like this where the conclusion could be here? Yes or no? No, that's right. The conclusion is always on the right side of that double slash. All right, given that you now know this, go ahead and do question 51. Actual question from your work. P stands for you practice your logic exercises. Q stands for you ace the quiz. If you practice your logic exercises, then you will ace the quiz. You practice your logic exercises, therefore you ace the quiz, and use our slashes in the chat bar and model that for me. Symbolize that. Doing this one. If you practice your logic exercises, then you will ace the quiz. And notice P and Q here has no bearing on anything, right? I used P and Q. And do the whole argument, not just one premise at a time. Do the whole thing. Use your slashes. And so I start again and just do the slash and double slash. Use those as well. Do the whole string. And I know folks want to do double spaces and the chat won't allow you to do it, so it's no big deal. And we use capitals, so Kamal, just in the homework as well, use capitals, right? So no big deal for now, because it's just the chat, but make sure in the homework, yeah, make sure you use capital letters. You got it. And the answer is, and then you would go check yourself in the solution, it'd be this, right? If P, then Q, P, therefore Q. Yeah. And notice here I'm switching to P and Q. You'll notice logicians use those letters. We use P, Q, R, S, and so on. These are conventions. I will start weaning ourselves away from those nice intuitive letters, especially after the test. I might for the test still use those, but you use whatever scheme of abbreviation I give you, even if it bears no relation, right? If you practice your logic exercises, right? Logic exercises is just P, just cuz, in the order in which I found them. Terrific. You get full marks for this. If you got one thing wrong, what do you get? Like, let's say there's one thing, or you get zero. You get zero. And again, here it wouldn't be wrong logically, right? If you put, let's say this, suppose you did this, right? It basically logically to say the same thing, but it would be an inferior symbolization. I'm going to give you zero. Let's look, I'm making a deal with you. I'm telling you that you can not worry about how you carve the premises. If it starts with a capital letter, ends with a period, that'll be your premise. And I've also made a sweet deal with you. I've said I'll put the conclusion always at the end for the test, although you won't always have that in the homework, right? But certainly for the test, I'll always put the conclusion at the end. That's really, really generous. So don't mess with me. The flip side is if you give me this, what grade am I going to give you? You inverted the premises. What grade am I going to give you? Zero. And I'll have good reason to give you zero. It really doesn't model well the passage that I've given you. And the flip side is I am being pretty generous because there's an equalizer setting there, a level of difficulty that I can play with, right? And if we spent one more week on this stuff, maybe I'd turn the knob a little bit, right? Okay, cool. If you will ace the quiz if you practice your logic exercises. You practice your logic exercises, therefore you ace the quiz. Q stands for you ace the quiz. P stands for you practice your logic exercises. Notice that the assignment here is different. So I've got, so actually the order of presentation is different, but same bloody thing. You will ace the quiz if you practice your logic exercises. You practice your logic exercises, therefore you ace the quiz. Pay attention to the scheme abbreviation, take your time, slash and double slash. You can imagine this would, this is too small for next week's test, but still, it's a good warm-up. And the answer is, da, 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 da. There you go. Same damn argument said differently, right? So same formal structure, language was different. The order was inverted. And notice, this is the what of the conditional. What's the name of this particular thing? It's the what of the conditional. It has two parts. The conditional has two parts. This is this thing over here is the antecedent of the conditional. That's right. And the part that's over here that comes after the antecedent is what's the technical term for that? Consequent. Yeah. I won't quiz you on the terminology, but we'll deploy the terminology in our operation table throughout the whole thing. All right. Let's have some fun. Manuel did not see the car coming. The car that hit him was blue or green. If the car was green, then Manuel would have seen it coming. Hence, the car was not green. Take your time. S, Manuel sees the car coming. B, the car that hit Manuel was blue. G, the car that hit Manuel was green. All on a horizontal line, single slashes, double slashes, take it systematically. When you're ready, click the chevron. You should take a little more time in your homework, but right now we're just trying stuff out in class. Normally, you don't rush when you're doing homework. And when you do the exam, you'll have 3 hours, so also don't rush there. Ignore Anako, I think that looks good. Ignore the first one, we don't have an M in the mix. So, yeah, just a little typo there. Yeah, no problem. And let's have a look at the correct answer. Right, so what you're going to do for your homework. Not S, so Manuel did not see the car coming. B or G, so the car that hit him was blue or green. Right? If it was green, then he saw it coming. Therefore, the car was not green. Right? There you go. And so what you do for the homework, this was question 55. The homework goes all the way to 66. You do all of those, right? And by the way, you can have fun and find arguments wherever, and you know how to make a scheme of abbreviation, and you can have fun, symbolizing them. And if the fun part is most arguments suck. People make bad arguments often, so maybe they're not logically going to be any good, but either way, you can still symbolize them so that you go on the Wild West called the internet, and you can find homework for yourself endlessly, an endless supply of homework. Okay, my friends, I'm looking at the clock. We at least started the second symbolization homework. Is everyone clear on what it is? The second symbolization homework just is now we're making arguments, and we got the slash and the double slash. We're all clear on that? We know what to expect? It's just like now we're going to take what we did for the first homework, but we're just going to string them together. In the first homework, I taught you compound propositions, right? And now you're just going to basically stick your compound propositions into these longer structures called arguments. Yeah, and you know how to use the brackets and premises. That's right. That you practiced last time, and terrific. So we did a lot today. We did great. All right, so what the hell do we do now? Now it's time to do a bunch of stuff. This is you. Remember, it's called homework because it happens at home and it's work. Your face on Moodle is a nice predictor of success, by the way. Statistically speaking, if I see your face on Moodle, you might pass the class. People that fail tend to be people who are not engaged, and it's a sign of disengagement to not put your face on there. So go ahead. I'm not saying that if you put your face, then you will succeed, but it is a predictor, right? So go ahead if you haven't done that yet. Plus, it makes it more human. Everybody else has done it. Let's go ahead and do that. And say something about yourself as well. Like, what are you studying? And that's kind of cool because I want to get to know you. Also, set up your shortcut keys. Those who have done it, do you find it helpful? So in the template, you've got instructions on how to do it. You use those exact symbols. Is it nice once you get the hang of it? Like I designed that particular shortcut key, thing. Yeah, it's once you get used to it, it's a little learning curve there, but man, it spares you time. I couldn't imagine living without it now because I have to do all this homework. And remember, you don't have a textbook. You don't pay for one because, I do it, right? So set that up. That's crucial. If someone gives me made up symbols in their exam. So let's say, for instance, someone, control A to control E. Bottom line is you do. The reason why I do the control letters that I do is because I leave the alphabet letters for other uses. So when I say control I for conditional, that's because sometimes conditional is called implication, and I need the C for conjunction. So I do control I because that's implication, and then for conditional, and then control C for conjunction, and so on. Plus I need some other letters because I do these more advanced logics, and they require all these other symbols as well. If someone took a logic class or a math class or whatever class, and let's say instead of of doing the arrow for conditional, they decide to do this. And instead of doing the, this is an ampersand, I'm doing it all wrong, but that's an and. What grade did they get? They show up with their made up symbols from another class. What grade did they get? Yay, 0. So don't make it easy on me. It's very arrogant if you show up with different symbols when I literally took the time to do a shortcut key stuff with instructions and a template and everything. Follow those instructions. If I see, for instance, these are not the standard chevrons. These are, like the one I told you to actually use is about the height of the proposition. It's not this little thing. It's fine in the chat bar right now, but like put the shortcut keys if you don't. It'll be a great excuse for me to give you 0 and I will suck because it's so disrespectful. Seriously, like I work really hard. Honor that stuff. Also, do drills step 5 and step 6. It's getting quick for time. Everybody, are we getting quicker? Can you feel your speed coming up? Like you practice, I don't know how many times you practiced before you got your 2%. How's your speed coming? Because you got to do this fast. It's got to be accurate and fast. Have fun with yourself. Like make a challenge out of it. It's getting better? Cool. Do not consult. Like commit to memory. Don't consult the basic truth tables. Yeah, once you understand what you're doing. And the thing is, at the beginning, it's okay to consult them. But if you keep consulting, I'm telling you right now, just drop the course. You're going to fail next month. Like you want to know this stuff or you're going to get your ass kicked. I'm sorry. Like it's the truth. Right? And you're going to need to know this. And it's going to have to seep into your subconscious. You're going to have to dream about that stuff. Because it's going to have to come out so quick, super quick, like Hawkeye shooting an arrow quick, you know? All right, so, and what else do we do? Well, we do the second symbolization homework. You type all 23 answers. You grade yourself. I don't want to see it. Spread it out, sleep in between, and you do it all over again if you have to. All right? How hungry are you for success? What are we doing? Next week, we're doing test 1 on symbolization. What time does the test start? What time? 10 a.m. 10 a.m. sharp. 10 a.m. sharp. Don't come in this room. I won't be here. All right? So don't show up in the big blue button. You'll waste precious minutes. At 10 a.m., the questions and the solution sheet appears, the answer sheet in which you'll type your answers. Also, I'm going to make available right now for week 2, all of your goodies. Can everyone have a look on the main Moodle page and have a look at main 2? Let me put this available for you right now. Hold on. Can everyone see? I've got a sample of here's what the symbolization test is going to look like, both the questions and the answers. Type in yes if you can see that. It should be right underneath week 2. Terrific. So you know what to expect. There's no big surprise. You'll have an upload spot. It will literally say, here's the test place right next. If you keep scrolling down, right, the equivalent of week 3. What time should you turn in your answers next week? And I've said this so many times, right? 12:30. 12:30. If you're late and you email me an attachment or your computer breaks down and you email me a PDF attachment and let's say you're on time and you have a great story, what grade do you get? 0. Yeah. If you cheat, what grade do you get and what happens? Because I'll find out, by the way. I can find out if you cheat. You won't believe me, but trust me, I got all sorts of ways of finding out. Remember, I do AI, yeah? So I'm not an idiot. And I'll kick you out of school, right? So don't cheat. And you're going to be an idiot. You're not going to learn the skill. So there you go. So that's what we got to do. Is everyone crystal clear? If you're crystal clear, type in CC, crystal clear. If you got a question, ask away. Have we reached crystal clarity? You're crystal clear. You know what you got to do? That's terrific. Then you bloody do it. On your way then. Let's say goodbye. And office time, we don't meet next Monday. Yeah, I'll talk to you in 2 weeks, Ignore. 2 weeks from now. That's it. And I'll grade the test will take about a week to 2 weeks to grade, by the way. Yeah. No worries, my friend. Edric, you take care. Have a good week, Dale. Kelly, thank you. Take care. Thank you, Cole. I hope a sunny day would be nice, huh? I heard this weird thing. I hope my audio is still on. If my audio is still on, someone type in yes. If you can still hear me, say goodbye. Well, Edric just replied something. Cool. All right, cool. I just psyched me out. I thought my USB key just got out of place. Take care, my friends. Keep working. Mitro, take care. Mantej, bye. Keep working hard. Swayam. Take care. Apply yourself, all right? I want to see you do well. It's too late after. LJ, take care. Same Edric, take care. Edison, bye. Avni, great questions today. Thank you. I can't do it alone. Babishi, take care. And this is office time, by the way. Anyone needs me, I'm sticking around, and I'll be there until I'll be the last one to leave. I got groceries this afternoon. Got lots. Life goes on, man. Jeez Louise. I hate groceries. I don't know about you. It's nice to have the food, but I don't want to get the food. Samuel, I'll see you on metaphysics. That's right. We're going to do some more logic, strangely enough. Yeah, but a different thing. Yeah, for different purposes. Yeah. Cool. Manav, Max, if you need me for something, you let me know in the chat bar. Otherwise, say goodbye and buttons at the top right. Great class today, by the way, everyone. Huge turnout, good level of energy. That's what I want. Let's just keep it up every week. Let's not keep our guards down. Let's keep, Max, you take care. Bye-bye. Take care. Good luck with the work. Spread it out, sleep, dream. You know you're doing well when you dream of logic. I remember watching this great documentary, by the way. It was called The Tetris Masters. And this was a documentary about people who play the video game Tetris at a competitive level. Like I thought I was good at Tetris, but they're like complete freaks. And one of the persons was saying that if you spend too many hours playing Tetris, you start seeing little blocks of Tetris everywhere you look. Like you go crazy. There's one scene where they're in a shower and there's water kind of dripping down the tiles, and they start imagining little Tetris blocks moving, and they're losing their mind. If you do this course and you work really hard, I'm telling you, you're going to start seeing logical symbols everywhere. That's actually the best sign that you're applying yourself. You're not going crazy. You're becoming a terrific student. That means you're really, really processing that and you're immersed in it. And then what's really nice, and this is the trade-off, is eventually you start to see, in a strict sense of the word to see with your eyeballs, logical structures that you weren't able to see before. They become available to view in a non-inferential manner. Whereas before you'd have to kind of work really hard and break it into parts. It's like you widen the scope of your lens, and all of a sudden information in the world streams in through your perceptual organs, and you're able to see logical relations where before you couldn't see them. And that's insanely cool to be able to do. And that's a testament to our ability to adapt as organisms. And so that's one of the trade-offs of this course. So yeah, just really, really cool stuff. My friends, terrific class. Good luck next week. And remember, act now while you can. Once it's done, it's too late. Okay, so regrets don't accomplish anything. So now's the time. All right, good luck, everyone.